Hello everyone, hope you're doing well. It's time to talk about the CV9030FIN. This is a light vehicle, which was added to the Swedish tech tree a little bit ago, but it's a vehicle I recently spaded since I was on a bit of a romp in the Swedish tech tree, and I've got to be honest, I was pretty disappointed with the vehicle. Like, at its BR, it works fine, and it's all good, and generally feels okay, but as a person who has already played stuff like the Strf 9040C and also the 9040B and the Strf 9040 Bill and spaded all of those, this vehicle just felt a bit like a letdown and not as good as those other vehicles, and that sucks. It really does. And the basic reason is because of the gun. The difference of 10mm in caliber between these vehicles makes a massive difference on how much damage that you do to other players. So, for example, the CV9030FIN, luckily I actually played it when its default belt was APDS, because when it came out, its default belt wasn't APDS. It was like a weird AP one, which meant that you couldn't pen anything, and you had to get to a much higher modification level to be able to get access to it. But yeah, the APDS pens less than 90mm, which means that you can only really kill most vehicles at the side, and even then, because it's a 30mm, with not a crazy high fire rate, by the way, it's a pretty low fire rate for the caliber, you end up penning and not doing enough damage to be able to finish off targets. Then you unlock an APFSDS at rank 3, which takes ages to get to, unfortunately, and it pens up to 116mm, and then 98mm at 30, and 60 degrees, it's 67mm. So quite an increase in general penetration, which is quite nice, but also you lose half of the projectile mass. So you gain some penetration and you lose a bunch of damage. The APDS is at 0.19 kilos, and the good old APFSDS is at 0.1 kilos. So when you penetrate a target, a lot of the time you just won't do enough damage to destroy it, and it is just a pain. The secondary systems on this thing are pretty good. It has scouting, of course, laser rangefinder, which is nice. Then also it has really good thermals for the commander and also the gunner, something that is a standard for these CV90s and also these SDRFs. So overall, you know, the secondary systems, the mobility, smoke grenades, all of this stuff is fantastic, but the gun itself just does not do enough damage, and it puts you in a lot of situations which just become very annoying. Even if you catch a lot of vehicles out on the side, what ends up happening is you shoot them on the side, you don't do enough damage, and they just turn and hammer you, and it's very, very annoying. Another thing about these Swedish vehicles / Finnish vehicles, since this is technically a Finnish vehicle, is they're very loud. Basically, these types of vehicles are incredibly loud, and that means that people can see you and can hear you from a very long way away. So using it as a light tank doesn't work as well as other vehicles. It also has a pretty decent targeting speed, but still not great compared to a lot of the competition. And another thing which isn't really its fault, but also exists, is the simple fact that the CV9030FIN is at 9.3. And right now, 10.0 and 10.3 are very strong. 10.0 with the Soviets, and 10.3 with America and Germany and even Britain. So 9.3 doesn't see its BR a lot. And if you get down-tiered in it, you know, you can do well with the gun, apart from against leopards, where you can't really pen their front, which is hilarious. Well, unless you hit, you know, the lower glaciers. But generally, you know, the vehicle gets up-tiered quite a lot, but that's just a current meta thing. That isn't the vehicle failing or anything like that. So the secondary factors are all great, you know. It's just the primary factor of the gun makes this thing not as fun to play as many of the other Swedish vehicles. And it kind of sucks, because at 9.3 you have a really cool lineup. You have the STR-V105, you have the T72M1, you have the Vik in its current form before it gets down BR'd and also loses its VT. But even then, you could put in the ITSFR for the, AA support if you want to. You also have an A32A and a J32B, something which a lot of BRs for Sweden don't have. You have some CAS elements. You even have like the Saab 105, which you can throw in, which will struggle a little bit, but at least it will be, competent. And you have this quite nice little banging BR, which is lovely. And, you won't get as banging of a BR until you get to 10.0, 10.3 with the Swedish, with the 9040C, the STRV 121, the Leopard 2A4, the STRF 9040 Bill, and it'll take you a bit of time to get there. But 493, this one works great, but it just sucks because of that post-pen damage. And hopefully, in the future, maybe something could be done about it. But if not, the problem with something like this is it does its job competently. It's able to scout, it's able to kill stuff sometimes, but there's just too many times where this vehicle will rack up or shack up against another vehicle, and what will end up happening is it just won't do enough, and you'll get destroyed. As somebody who's been playing a lot around this BR recently, with the CV9030FIN, T55M, recently with the Bishmar, and also the Vickers Mark 7, obviously the Leopard 2A4, the Leopard 2A7, and the TAM2C, and the Radkampfwagen. Having a vehicle which doesn't annihilate a vehicle in one shot, or at least cripple them in one shot, is not fun at all. And also, because of the fire rate, you can't follow up quick enough to be able to finish it off. It reminds me of when you're in, a general light tank, maybe like a Puma or maybe something like that, where you end up shooting the front of an MBT and it just laughs at you and then you fire back and just annihilate. But even with the CV9030, it can't even create enough smoke from its gun to be able to make people confused about what's shooting at it. And it doesn't really have the armor to be able to hold it off either. Generally, with the vehicle, a lot of people will pen the turret and not destroy it though. For some reason, they just somehow miss the big ammo belt, which is just sat there, and it usually hits the commander or it hits the gunner. But the kill shot on this thing, especially if you're hull down, is not exactly easy to do, so you will survive a lot from that. Another thing it also doesn't get, which is a big downgrade from the 40mm series, is it doesn't get HEVT. So the general multi-role capability of destroying, general air vehicles is not as easy to do. You still can go after helicopters, and I've done it quite a lot, and, you can do pretty well with it, but it's not something that is, something that you have to be a lot more accurate, basically, and the targeting speed also isn't there, so you have to be a bit careful with that stuff. So even though this vehicle works very well at this BR as a supportive light tank, compared to the other vehicles that are around it for Sweden, it just kind of sucks, and it is really sad because Sweden has so many cool light tanks, the IKV 91-105 and also the STRFs, and I was so much looking forward to this one, especially after having a great time in the STRFs, but unfortunately it just didn't live up to the hype. It just doesn't do enough, and it needs to do a little bit more to be fun. As always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. I'd just like to thank Tullio Pontecorvo, Brendan Quinn, Carrion Crow, Gus Irenicus, Pieman, Wartinder, Teddy, Daniel Stanton, Martinez, B. Young, Alan Hacker, Ozzy Panzer, Liam Shear, Opium Prime, Lafouche, Cam Arslan, Uncle Bean, and Derek R. for supporting the channel.